bit about Rani. Rani is PhD candidate in sociology and anthropology, supervised by Professor Tim Winter and Dr. Yu Tao. She has MPhil in Chinese Studies from Jawaharlal Nehru University and PG from Beijing Language and Cultural University. Previously worked teaching Chinese language and literatures, and also as interpreter for PM Office in New Delhi. So Rani, the time is yours.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon. I'm Rani, and today I'm going to talk about my PhD project, which is in very early stage, and talking about my PhD. This month I've completed 1 year into this program, and my ethics application is under review due to travel restrictions. And my supervisors guiding over this project are Professor Tim Winter and Professor Yu Tao. And the title of my PhD is Silk Road Geoculturalisms, Building Cultural Corridors of China's Belt and Road Initiative. So in this presentation, I'm going to introduce the broad methodology of the study, which is oriented around developing the concept of geoculture in the context of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, the concept of geoculture comes from Wallerstein's analogy of geopolitics to geoculture. He used this concept to explain the core periphery shifts in the modern world system during the late 20th century. And according to him, all world systems have geoculture. In his definition, geoculture is values that are shared very widely within the world system. For example, to call liberalism as true geoculture of the 19th century, its transnational, imperial, and global character should be taken into account. However, he refers to the norms and modes of discourse widely accepted within the world system, seeing geoculture self-existing with the outset of the world system, which does not explain how geoculture gets created within the system, and hence providing knowledge on the conceptualization of the term. Later, Ulf Hanner's his works helps us think about the world systems more geoculturally. His analysis of geocultural imaginations and geocultural scenarios interpret and imagine culture at different scales distributed over diverse territories and humanity. He interprets the number of world events post 9/11, like the end of history, the clash of civilizations, jihad versus mech world, the world is flat, as global scenarios or geocultural imaginations. Now, as these events cross boundaries between academic and public spheres, reaching out to transnational audiences, creating worldwide debates, he sees these global scenarios as a significant component in building up cosmopolitan collective consciousness. He argues that most of these scenarios are about international affairs, politics, and economics, so the need to draw culture comes in here. And the culture, according to him, the concept of culture is flexible in terms of scale, which implies culture can be imagined at various scales by using the word geo with it. We can interpret several map-making processes over region and their people. Now, very recently, Winter, in similar context, refers to nation state as the most embedded geocultural imaginaries of the modern era. In his view, Great Game, Cold War, and Silk Road are also among the geocultural categories that have given form to larger indefinite entities. Now, at present, we have, again, a new geocultural form that is the Belt and Road Initiative of China. And Winter has talked about BRI as the Silk Road discourse through the biography of the Silk Road connectivities of the late 19th century and how China, being the home of silk production, has been able to locate itself at the center of the world, both geographically and culturally. He has analyzed Silk Road as the geocultural form in ascendancy. Now, in similar veins, I seek to apply this framework and look at BRI as a geocultural form and as the geoculture of the 21st century. Since today, the geography of China's rise sees the strongest manifestation and outreach through Belt and Road Initiative. So I'll just talk briefly about what is BRI first. So announced in 2013 by the Chinese President Xi Jinping, Belt and Road Initiative is the flagship foreign policy initiative of China. It's an ambitious program to connect Asia with Africa and Europe via land and maritime networks along 6 economic corridors with the aim of improving regional integration, increasing trade, and stimulating economic growth. It also combines new and old projects, covers an expansive geographic scope and includes efforts to strengthen hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and cultural ties. Now, interestingly, the Chinese discourse frames the BRI as the revival of the ancient Silk Roads for the 21st century. Now, in the background of this revival, the use of Silk Road history-based themes, objects, figures, items of trade, central to the Silk Road story are gaining particular importance, especially where BRI projects have high stakes. Now, in the process of this revival, there is drawing of geographies and organization of culture in a particular fashion. So, though BRI is a global initiative, but the nature of framing it along the ancient Silk Route brings Asia into focus. And in Asia, something more interesting than just geopolitics or geoeconomics is going on, where ancient civilizations like India and China, which are also two rising economic giants, they both seem to be seeking for geocultural capital, and the various objects significant to the Silk Road story are getting folded onto the history of Silk Road, while these civilizations are seeking for owning history and exerting their influence. Now, talking about BRI as geoculture of the 21st century, I see that not much of Western media and academics have connected BRI with civilizational dialogue. Most literature on BRI focuses on the geopolitics, seeing BRI as an east-west connectivity. So there is lack of focus on civilizational dialogue, which BRI and its cultural infrastructure are reactivating in Asia. So it is in the background of such developments that a big goal of this PhD is to connect the Western debates and the Silk Road discourse with the Asian debates on BRI. And in Asia, the central theme of Silk Road discourse is Buddhism. And looking at the present developments in the context of propagating BRI through Buddhism, I intend to look at the ongoing Buddhist initiatives to conceptualize the process of geoculturalism. So in doing so, this PhD further develops the concept of geocultural in order to conceptualize geoculturalism as a new approach, as a process of redrawing of geographies and reorganization of culture in Asian cities with shared Buddhist heritage. And to conceptualize this process of geoculturalism, I'm going to look at the use of shared Buddhist heritage as diplomacy by countries like India and China. Now, why do I choose Buddhism? So some Asian scholars all see Buddhist diplomacy at great play in South Asia, which are predominantly Buddhist. And this diplomacy gets translated into investments in buildings and institutions, more specifically in the background of BRI. So China is both creating and revitalizing Buddhist cultural infrastructure in BRI partner countries of Southeast Asia with shared Buddhist history to promote BRI. Now, use of Buddhism diplomacy is not very new. Use of Buddhism diplomacy has a deep history to it, serving as the state religion of major empires, and Pan-Asian movements leveraged Buddhism to travel beyond conventional sectarian geographical boundaries, drawing in profound intercultural exchanges and dialogue. Buddhism has an intrinsic transnational framework enjoying pre-existing network of intellectual, cultural, social, and political ties. And in the background of BRI, we see multiple geocultural scenarios emerging through the use of Buddhism to culturally engage in politically dialogue with countries. And now looking at the Buddhist initiatives in the South Asian region helps us understand the motives of bringing this BRI infrastructure into a Buddhist context. So China may appear as the most active player in the region. However, it is not alone. Other big players like India and Japan are also using shared Buddhist heritage and tapping on Buddhism's philosophical, diplomatic, and normative powers to advance the spiritual conduits of regional cooperation. So for example, most Asian countries are instrumentalizing Buddhism, but nothing like China and India. In the background of significant political consequences in the context of Tibet and the succession of the Dalai Lama, there is stiff competition to gain control over major Buddhist heritage sites in Nepal between both the countries. Now, Nepal has become a battleground for wider geopolitical struggle between India and China. And I shall look at this ongoing competition, cooperation, diplomacy, multiculturalism, connectivity, networks, and corridors, all of this as a process of Silk Road geoculturalism. So here are a few of the instances that I have tracked since 2013, wherein Buddhist initiatives are at Great Plains, South Asian region. So for example, especially in Lumbini, Nepal, which is also the birthplace of Buddha, it largely remained irrelevant. However, it largely remained irrelevant for majority of world's Buddhists. And in recent years, Lumbini has developed $70 billion wellness tourism industry, becoming a lucrative attraction in South Asia. In Lumbini, Buddhism is used to market spa packages, meditation retreats, yoga, develop the cultural economy for Buddhist pilgrimage and tourism. Now it is speculated that this market is growing at the fastest global rate in China, India, and Southeast Asian countries. And according to experts, with that, China is aiming to control the succession of the next Dalai Lama, as well as the lucrative Buddhist tourist market in South Asia. So in doing so, we see that Buddhism becomes a corridor of prestige, wherein through BRI, China can extend its civilizational influence as well as ensure its geopolitical ambitions of bringing peace to Tibet. So China's efforts to claim Lumbini has aroused interesting dynamics in the region. Nepal is becoming a cultural corridor from India to China, ensuring flow of cultural goods, flow of material, people, religion, all forming a transnational Buddhist network. Now here then the use of Buddhism as a diplomacy, as a corridor of prestige to exert civilizational influence, reveal the convergence of geopolitics and geoculture. And such values are traveling across this corridor through Buddhist forums, Buddhist festivals, tourism, cultural events, and heritage revival projects. Now, in the wake of BRI, you will see how the convergence of geopolitics and how new forms of geoculturalism come into being. Now, even on numerous international Buddhist meetings, we see China has started to gain support from the international Buddhist scholars and monks. And there is youth support and initiative from the Chinese side in building Buddhist knowledge networks, Buddhist schools, academic institutions, setting up of Buddhist structures, museums, and heritage preservation sites. And Buddhist monks and scholars are joining in hands to promote BRI development, making it a vehicle to propagate Buddhism and vice versa. So we do see that such Buddhist forums are doing ample political and economic work, besides the cultural and religious work that they're expected to do. And many of the core values of Buddhism resonate now with the official visions of BRI, and at the same time reflect the needs of the countries across Eurasia. And in the political rhetorics of mutual benefits and win-win, there is emphasis of non-interference as stated in the official policy line of China. And these values of mutuality and win-win can be retraced into Chinese Buddhism and traditional Asian societies. And if in actuality BRI assimilates the principles of Buddhism, China will gain a strong Buddhist support from the international Buddhist community. And many international Buddhist organizations and communities will come forward and support the initiative once they see that the values of Buddhism that they preach have been manifested in a project of immense economic and diplomatic significance. So these are a few of the recent examples and initiatives to gauge how through assembling new trade routes and bringing other regions closer, China, through BRI, is remapping history and the world geography altogether. And the timeless, spaceless, beyond geographies and open border characteristics of Buddhism is helping smoothen that process. Now, talking about the methodology of the project, the COVID situation has given me two pathways, which is gathering my data sets with or without fieldwork. Now, whenever the travel restrictions are lifted, I plan to proceed for my fieldwork in Lumbini, Nepal, and Langzhou, China. And here's to one of the many examples of the recent developments in the cities I wish to visit. So this is This is the Silk Road Cultural Relics Park, and this is not Giza. This is actually a replica built in the four great ancient civilization zones situated in the Lanzhou city of China, which was a major trading hub on Silk Road. And there is a 267-hectare park built to develop animation, film, gaming, and tourism industry here. Then again, this is Gautam Buddha International Airport under construction, which was supposed to open for tourists and pilgrimage this year. And this month, Lumbini was to host the biggest international Buddhist conference and the UN Vesak Festival to be organized by China. And according to media reports, this conference was aimed at highlighting Lumbini as the original place of Buddha over the Indian city of Bodh Gaya, which has for long been the highest pilgrimage site for Buddhists all over the world. However, nevertheless, Lumbini is already in the process of becoming into a spiritual Disneyland for tourists. And according to Chinese media reports, this is the organization behind the project, which called Asia Pacific Exchange and Cooperation Foundation, which is widely thought to have China's backing and had signed an agreement with United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, to invest $3 billion in Lumbini and turn it into an international peace city. Now, given the present circumstances, if my fieldwork does not seem possible, I'm figuring out and discussing with my supervisor to make amendments in my project and make it more desk-oriented, or if feasible, try online methods. However, this also gives me an opportunity to make my project conceptually tight and make use of my Chinese language skills to explore the Chinese debates, Indian debates, and other Asian debates, as I see there is a need to bring the Asian debates and Asian discourse on Silk Road into the mainstream, because the Silk Road discourse is constructed around the language of revival and is mostly seen as East-West connectivity. So specifically, I'm going to look at the new Silk Roads as drivers of inter and intra-Asian connectivity. And in that direction, I have been tracking the developments since 2013 through the series of conferences, forums, and meetings hosted by diverse bodies under the umbrella of Buddhism in Asia. And what I really start to see is a kind of ecology of geoculture of Buddhist diplomacy developing here. And what I have also been able to gather through the speeches and statements of Buddhist monks and international leaders at various Buddhism-themed BRI meetings is that dialogue is the core component in facilitating BRI, and use of Buddhism to culturally engage and politically dialogue with neighboring countries with Buddhist traditions is becoming an important pillar of BRI, building its cultural corridors.
Rani, sorry, you have 2 minutes left.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just find out. Now, talking about the significance, building off the existing research on BRI as geopolitical, geoeconomics, and geocultural, this project would be significant for identifying new geocultural trends emerging in the process of revival of Silk Road in the 21st century. And it will look at how these geocultural trends will likely continue developing in the coming decades and the roles they will play in fostering inter and intra-Asian connectivity. And so in doing so, this project addresses the emerging Buddhist geocultural infrastructure, cultural economy, and cultural developments as a process of geoculturalism. And by interrogating the cultural geopolitics of the use of shared Buddhist heritage as a tool of diplomacy, the study would depart from existing research framework that framed Buddhism as religion, intends to go beyond religion and analyze Buddhism as a culture, especially as a geocultural form in the context of BRI. And lastly, I would say that listing down a number of policies and projects, economic or political initiatives intended to invoke the values of Silk Road, such as diversity, tolerance, and mutual benefit, do not provide a complete picture of the visions as laid down in the goals of BRI. And to me, I see that BRI and its nature is not well defined. It started as an idea, then popularized as a nomenclature, then as a strategy, and now it is known as an initiative. So whether the Chinese government really wants to define BRI, or will it keep going on with campaign slogans like community of shared future for mankind, or do they don't want to define so as to have more flexibility, or will BRI define itself in the coming years So these are the few questions that compel me to conceptualize this whole BRI phenomena beyond the existing rhetorics of geopolitics and geoeconomics. So with that, I end here, and I welcome your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Rani. Thank you for a great presentation.